Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about some of the worst campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, when I say that these are the worst campaigns in the game, just to be very clear on this, I'm not going to be talking about the campaigns that flat out just don't work very well. Think of Daniel, the Demon Prince. No. Instead, what I want to talk about are the campaigns of Legendary Lords of functional races, functional Legendary Lords, in the sense that you can play their campaigns, and it won't necessarily be quite a painful experience to do so just because your mechanics don't work properly or flat out missing mechanics like a research tree for Daniel, but even so, they just end up not being a great experience. And we start at number 5 with Helmengorst. Undeniably a really powerful Legendary Lord in both battle and on the campaign. The Vampire Counts, in general, are a pretty powerful race because they have the ability of vassalizing various factions, they have a good economy, they have good lords to lead their armies, and Gorst himself does have a significant level of power with his zombies. This is a guy that, with his zombies, through his special skill line, he can raise the dead much more effectively than others. He can give Ravenous dead, so his zombies flat out can't die in battle against the vast majority of foes. And zombies are incredibly cheap on the campaign side of things. So there are obviously going to be significant benefits in this campaign. But why doesn't it work? Why is it a horrible campaign to actually play? Well, a couple of reasons. In battle, the zombies themselves are boring as dirt to use. Easily one of the most boring armies in the campaign to ever use. Spamming zombies will work, and you don't have to just spam zombies, but you know that the zombies can carry you in your campaign. You know that they can defeat virtually everyone around you. Oh, dealing with Gringor, just spam 4 armies of zombies at him, they will win. That is freaking ridiculous. But zombies, just spamming zombies, ordering them to attack against the enemy, and then just sitting there for 20 minutes while they win the battle ever so slowly, is not really a fun or interesting experience. So that's one of the first things that really makes this campaign horrible. Now, you don't have to go with zombies, but if this is the best thing you can do in a campaign, if it is a significant portion of your strength, then you are kind of pushed in that direction. On top of that, with Helmengorst, it's the issue that he's the furthest away from the other Vampire Counts Legendary Lords. So he doesn't even have the benefit of being able to confederate Legendary Lords that are much better than him, like Vlad, Isabella, Manfred, Kemmler. Whereas if you're playing a Vlad campaign, you can certainly realistically get at least Kemmler, the Red Duke, and maybe even Manfred, though why exactly you'd bother with Manfred, that's a different discussion. Honestly, you could argue that Manfred is the worst Legendary Lord in a lot of ways, but honestly, at least as Manfred, you get magic, you get the Books of Nagash, even if it's a horrible system, and you don't just get away with using zombies. So that's a more interesting campaign, even if the Thunderdome that he's part of isn't necessarily the best campaign experience. But Gorst, he has a very easy campaign, but a very boring campaign at the same time. So you're not really learning to play the game. You will not improve as a player when you are playing this campaign. There is no risk, very little in the way of reward, and I would just recommend flat out not playing this particular campaign. Again, you can win it, no problem. You can win it, you can do very well, you can carve up a vast and powerful empire around the world, you certainly have a good enough race, a good enough faction, good enough climate, but damn, did CA miss the mark on this one. By the way, Gorst's DLC, Grim the Grave, is considered, at least on Reddit, as the single worst DLC in Warhammer Total War history. Make of that what you will. And number 4, it is Volkmar the Grim. Yeah, I'm sure this is a big surprise. As I said, Grim in the Grave is one of the worst DLCs according to community votes on Reddit. And there's many good reasons for that particular ranking. I think with Volkmar, Creative Assembly was trying to add some uniqueness in his campaign. Let me just say that I think they flat out failed with respect to that. Why would I say they failed? Well, my particular perspective on the subject is the fact that, yes, certainly Volkmar does have a playable campaign, and yes, the Empire is a much better race right now than it was before Thrones of Decay. So this campaign is playable, and you can actually gain a huge level of power in this particular campaign. Sure, you do have a bit of a difficult early game dealing with Manfred, but honestly your Flagellants, as well as other early game Imperial units, can certainly deal with that situation. That ain't the problem in this campaign. And you can argue, well, you have a really great climate situation, right? Because you can take the wastelands, you can journey back all the way to the Empire. All well and good, in theory. But what makes this campaign so damn miserable is how this works. You start with a port settlement, a tier 2 port settlement, but you're in a province with 2 settlements where you have ports, so that means your initial campaign situation is going to be limited. That means less variety, less access to units. Even with mods like I am using right here, which do add a greater variety because they just speed up the early game by quite a significant amount, is still not a particularly great experience, I gotta tell you, on that particular level. In any real way, shape, or form, honestly. So that's one of the things. That early game situation is not great. Worse. Oh boy, does it get worse. Worse. You know what makes a campaign good or bad in a lot of ways? Victory conditions. Your victory condition, your short campaign victory condition, is to wipe out Manfred. Fair enough, reasonable enough, he's right there. Your other victory condition is deal with Kairos. Jeez. I swear this campaign would be 10 times better if not for that freaking victory condition. And it's actually a meaningful victory condition because hero capacity is very meaningful for the Empire. And even if you do decide to ignore it, you're missing out on quite a bit with respect to that. Mind you, you can increase hero capacity for all heroes as the Empire tier 3, so maybe it doesn't matter that much, but having to go deal with Kairos through the jungle, that alone is torture, but then having to go on sea to invade the Castaways, which is uninhabitable for a victory condition when you don't want to do that for any other reason, is honestly just plain torture. In the basic case scenario, you can hope that Axiatl and Teclis do wipe him out. Good luck with that one. I've seen this guy, well, maybe he doesn't win, but I've certainly seen this guy survive for 100 turns easily on many legendary campaigns. So you're going to have to deal with it. It is not a fun experience. It's not that it's not doable, it very much is, but geez, that honestly is an awful experience. And this is compounded by the fact that one of your main objectives in this campaign to unlock a good amount of power and the uniqueness of Electrocon State Troopers, which are pretty awesome to use, but the unique aspect is the Books of Nagash, which are in the exact opposite direction. So the Books of Nagash are to the north, northwest, northeast, or just plain west, whereas Kairos is directly to the south. I mean, if you're willing to torture yourself for like 100 turns to pull that off, sure, you can gain a lot of power, but most campaigns by that particular point are going to be over. So even with mods, I would not really recommend playing this particular campaign in any way, shape, or form. It is genuinely that bad of an experience in Warhammer 3. Like, I think if they improved, like, this campaign would be salvageable if the Books of Nagash were a different system than they currently are. But as things stand, I would really not recommend playing this campaign. And you can say, well, why this campaign and not Marcus Wolfhard? My answer to that particular question comes down to this. Marcus Wolfhard has flat-out broken campaign mechanics, right? The hostility meter. Volkmar doesn't have completely broken mechanics. This is, you know, the qualifier for this list. If it's broken pure broken campaign mechanics, then it doesn't qualify, right? In broken in the sense that it's just not a great situation dealing with those systems, and they hurt you far more than they benefit you. Whereas with Volkmar, the books do give you a significant benefit. It is a genuine benefit. It is not like, it's not like you're gonna gain nothing. Whereas with Volkmar, you gain nothing from hostility except freaking headaches. So yeah, don't play either of those campaigns. But you know, for the purposes of this list, I am certainly going to include Volkmar the Grim. And again, the Empire is a very functional race. You can play this campaign. It's not the worst experience. It's not Daniel tier, but yeah, just really not a good campaign experience. And I think it shows more than anything that campaign start, especially given the meta of Warhammer 3, is very important to the success of a campaign. And number 3, it would be Nari of Solish, and is a perfectly good indication that Creative Assembly does need to rework Solish, because honestly, in virtually every way that counts, this campaign is awful. You could potentially include all the Warriors of Chaos campaigns on this list because of their vassalization mechanic, but I think no other campaign is quite as terrible in terms of vassalization as Nari's campaign. So, like, for all the issues that Warriors of Chaos do have in their campaigns, they work, right? It's just that vassalization trivializes the game. Here's the problem, though, in this particular campaign. Vassalization trivializes the game, but you're still playing a crap faction. So you're not really playing the campaign here, you're letting the game play one for you. So the early game of this campaign, to be certain, is brutal, right? Dealing with Alariel, dealing with Alfarian, dealing with Tyrion is not an easy road to conquer all of Wolf 1. It absolutely isn't. But here's the problem beyond that. While it's certainly fun and interesting and difficult to deal with Wolf 1, there's absolutely no other reason to play this campaign than dealing with that. Because once you've dealt with Wolf 1, there's nothing more in this campaign. No challenge, no interesting objective, just a huge, huge level of frustration in this. There's a couple of problems, and one of them has to deal with the vassalization aspect. Once you vassalize Alariel, Alfarian, and Tyrion, you've trivialized the campaign. And you could say, well, you could choose not to do that. Again, it's a core part of a faction and a race, so you could choose not to do it, but that's the kind of the whole damn point about Nari. You do have that ability of vassalizing. You have so many ways of vassalizing. Pure freaking diplomacy, domination, subjugations. You have more ways of vassalizing factions than anyone else in the game. So it is a core design element of this campaign. The problem with vassals is they're basically an I win button. You're not interacting with them as much as they should. I think it would be a lot more interesting if you could directly control vassals. That would certainly add a far more interesting campaign dynamic for everyone that has to deal with vassals. If you had to not just worry about your faction, but your vassal factions as well. I do think that could be really good, really interesting. But you don't. So you might get some units from vassals, sure, you might give them some objectives, some missions, but that's about it. You're never really going to have the level of control that you should, and you're never really going to worry about many of these vassals. I mean, especially the Wolf 1 ones, because who do you think is going to invade Wolf 1? And even if someone does invade Wolf 1, Tyrion, Alariel, and Alfarian will beat the crap out of everyone, especially if they're your vassals. I mean, it can be hilarious to, vassalize, say, someone like Grimgor or Tyrion, Alariel, Alfarian, and just watch them beat the shit out of everyone. Even more hilarious if you vassalize all the Dark Elven factions as well, which you absolutely can. Could be a bit of fun. But here's another problem. Your auto-resolve is generally one of the worst in the game. Unless you get a bunch of units with high durability, high armor especially. But even then, the fun that comes in battles from a Solish campaign comes from having a really fast mobile army that is a glass cannon army but can move really fast, right? That can be interesting. It's not so interesting when you have a lot of sieges, when you don't have the ability of breaking down walls, which, maybe, a Keeper of freaking Secrets should have the ability of breaking down walls. Just putting that out there. We need more units with Wall Breaker in the game. Creative Assembly, it would make sieges better. Honestly, just use a mod that removes sieges. That's probably the best option in the game. Just replace them with field battles. There's a reason why SFO, for many things I can criticize about it, but there's a reason why SFO does stuff like that. I think it would be very welcome if Creative Assembly understood that. And look, you can make things better with mods, like auto-resolve mods, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely, I'm not disputing that. It's still not gonna be a freaking great experience. That's the problem with an Nari campaign. And you end up, and on top of that, you have a really horrible casualty replenishment situation. You have literally no way of improving casualty replenishment in this campaign, so you end up collapsing compared to many other better factions. Okay, you could get, you know, you can get some possibilities, but even then they're not particularly great possibilities. But yeah, you have very limited ability of increasing casualty or replenishment, to the exception of things like this, right? Fetid Gallopot. So it ends up being quite bad, especially because many of your units are the kind of units that would take a lot of damage. I really can't recommend this campaign, except maybe once, but once you play it once and experience what it is to deal with Wolf 1 in the early game, not worth playing this campaign ever again, because it's going to be the same thing again and again and again. So it's not even replayable from that perspective. At number 2, it would be Teclis, and honestly I could make a firm argument that he would genuinely deserve that number 1 spot on this list. This has been a campaign for really good race that has generally been broken ever since it was introduced in Warhammer 2. And broken in the sense, not that it doesn't work, not that the Lord isn't powerful. Teclis certainly has a good amount of magical power for himself, of course. You can get some useful spells, or even if he doesn't get useful spells, he at least can cast a great deal of them. So Teclis works from a power standpoint, the race works from a lot of aspects, but I think if you were to ask anyone that's ever played the High Elf campaign if they would enjoy playing Teclis' campaign, that the vast majority of people would say no. The reason is, well, there's numerous reasons, but let's go over a couple of things. The High Elves are a race that does very well in the late game. They build up slowly, right? But once they build up, they are very powerful. As opposed to Dark Elves, which are about tearing it down, the High Elves are about building it up, all well and good. One of the problems with the High Elves is that you end up using the same stuff in every single campaign. Spearmen and archers for the early game, if not the entirety of your campaign. Now, Teclis gets a recruitment benefit for Lore Masters of Hoeth, Mages, and Archmages, which is useful until you realize that Lore Masters of Hoeth are a tier 4 hero. Mages only increase capacity at tier 4 as well. So really, for a good portion of your campaign, it's only going to be an Archmage benefit. And there's pros and cons with recruiting Archmages to lead armies. Personally, I do prefer getting princes and even princesses. I prefer to get my magic from heroes. You might benefit from getting an Archmage early on, but you already have a lord that has magic. So you can generally just chuck a mage in, you know, a second army like this, or a tertiary army. I did recruit one Archmage for this campaign, but still. So you have a campaign that inherently, because of the race, would play slower. And what does EA do? They make it even slower than that. Because the climate that is suitable in Teclis' campaign is jungle. I mean, just look at it. It's jungle, it's savanna, and it's temperate island. So yeah, you can take Wolf 1. You won't be able to take any of the territory surrounding Wolf 1, which is going to make it quite bad. In fact, what's even worse about this campaign is like you can go share a border with the Camry Thunderdome, but shortly thereafter you'll come to the realization, and I don't know why my scroll is bugging out, but you'll come to the realization, well, I'm not going to be able to join that Thunderdome because it is uninhabitable climate. You can fix this with climate mod. I do have it enabled. I have a bunch of mods enabled in this campaign. But what's even worse about this campaign, beyond the fact that the climate is bad, jungle in general for every race, every campaign that deals with jungle as the primary climate is horrible. Jan Bo is horrible, Marcus Wolfhard is horrible, the Lizardmen are horrible. The best ones are the Skaven because they can traverse things faster with the Underway. Or Forik, like seriously, Forik has a much better jungle campaign than anyone else. Because yeah, Underway plus Dwarves equal power. But Teclis' awful situation is compounded by the fact that his initial enemy, his principal one, is going to be Kairos. So you're having to cross the sea to attack Kairos, who, by the way, has a teleport stance that he can use to ambush you right on top of your armor. So it's not quite a stock stance, but he has a really powerful powerful ability to teleport right on top of you, ambush your army, and destroy you. Because this is exactly what he's going to do on the intern over here. He's going to teleport right on top of this army, ambush it, and likely fucking destroy it. Or just regularly attack it, and yeah, that's going to be painful. Dealing with an enemy, an uninhabitable climate, even if you're using mods, and climate that does attrition unless you're using your first invocation of Isha, which I certainly have done here, is not really a great experience. You end up with a much slower campaign because of these things combined. And even when you play things longer, it's not like the long term of this campaign is in any way better. It is not. Dealing with Lustria is not a fun experience in any campaign that has to deal with Lustria, but it's certainly far worse for a race that generally builds slower, and it's worse for techless. High Elves do have some issues in terms of that particular dynamic, but there is no campaign of the High Elves that comes even remotely close to techless. There's better mages in the game. Hell, we can argue Alariel as a mage has a much better magical focus campaign than freaking techless. There's much better mages in the game. There's much better High Elf Legendary Lords in the game. There's better diverse campaigns in the game. Techless is one of the worst campaigns ever designed by Creative Assembly, and it has been the case since Warhammer 2. In sharp contrast to Tyrion, which has been one of the best campaigns ever since he was introduced in Warhammer 2, and has been changed in pretty much no way whatsoever, except like racial changes for the High Elves. Just goes to show that whoever designed Tyrion knew what they were doing, whoever designed Techless didn't care. Or maybe they were trying to go for diversity and it just flat out failed. His quest battles aren't even that great. Well, one of them he shares with Tyrion, so whatever. But the other one, yeah, not really fun at all. So, there is that. So after all of this, what could be the #1 worst campaign in Immortal Empires? I think you all know what's coming up. And of course, it would be the Changeling at #1. By far and away, the single worst campaign that Creative Assembly has ever designed in any of their games, because it's not really a campaign in a Total War game. Honestly, I would not necessarily even consider this a good campaign on any game level, because it is a campaign that is so trivial, that is so easy and so boring that you can't enjoy it in any way, shape, or form. It is probably the most unpopular campaign that anyone has ever played. If you've bought Shadows of Change and played this campaign, it probably wasn't a great experience for the vast majority of you. And the reason is, for those that are unaware of this, when we play a game, we need to have something at stake. And if there's not something at stake, there's something else that draws us to it. Like, you know, if we're playing a story-focused game, we might not care about the gameplay, but we're playing it for a story. That's fine. There's a whole controversy right now over, you know, Dragon Age, Veilguard having a God mode difficulty, basically. But I think that's fine for a game like that. But Total War is not like that. It's a strategy game first and foremost. It's not narrative-focused. I think there is room for a narrative-focused campaign in Total War, absolutely, but not the way Creative Assembly has ever handled it in any of their games. And the Changeling is the worst of the bunch because, one, the AI can't deal with you, even if they try, so you can't lose, even if you try. I think you would have to try extremely freaking hard to lose a Changeling campaign, like literally give up yourself in order to do it. And even then you might not lose, because the AI might not remove your settlements. So it is a really awful design of a campaign to begin with. On top of that, your armies, you might think, oh, Siege has a bunch of fun units. Yeah, except your recruitment is limited not through gold or growth, but through cult supply. So every building you construct and the multiple tiers of it do require cult supplies. This is particularly bad, like, you know, with other factions that may require growth for their settlements or some resource, it's typically the first tier of a building, right? With the Changeling, that is absolutely not the case. You need to get cult supplies for every single tier of a particular building. And to be quite blunt about it, that is not a great experience. At least your cults can't be destroyed, but it does create a really bad dynamic. Now, Creative Assembly's idea of trying to balance this out was to make it so that your armies would be invisible when in territories with a cult. Which is not a great idea because it means, again, the AI can't really counter you. I mean, the AI couldn't really counter you to begin with because they can't, you know, find your cults to destroy them. But when even your armies are not at risk at all, that is not great. On top of that, you don't even destroy settlements by the AI. You don't wipe out AI factions. You leave them alive because that's incredibly beneficial for you to do. From an economics standpoint. That's how you gain money. Leave the factions alive, and if they fight among each other, that's great. Now, I understand the intent. Creative Assembly was trying to make a campaign where you're just causing chaos. But the problem is you're not really causing chaos as much as just being a genuine annoyance to everyone. The actions you have on the campaign are not meaningful. Sure, you can defeat any faction and raise all their settlements to the ground, but that's not really what's going to achieve campaign success for you. You need to complete these schemes, and geez, these schemes are dull as dirt. Okay, so you need to complete 5 theaters of war in order to unlock your ultimate battle and win the campaign. The problem is the objectives here are just so damn tedious. Oh, put 75 corruption in Castle Drakenhof, which just basically means put a bunch of... Go fight Vlad, put a bunch of cults. Oh, destroy the Fekionites for 10% casualty replenishment. Really fun. When the AI, again, can't reliably target you, you can always pick your fight. Say what you will about someone like Scarbrand, he can be forced in fights that are not favorable to him. When you're playing the Changeling, that is absolutely not the case, and even if you are, at any point in the campaign, your Tsangors and Forsaken of Tzeentch are quite capable of defeating anything that you might encounter very, very early on in a campaign. So it doesn't lend itself to a great campaign dynamic in any way, shape, or form. Again, just really horrible design from that perspective. And that's not even talking about the bugs. Like, beyond the fact that these schemes end up being meaningless. Oh, it's like you're causing an imperial civil war. Big deal. It will be over in a couple of turns. Oh, you go to the Darklands, you can cause a massive greenskin rebellions. Every faction wipes it out in a turn. Oh, you go to Grand Cafe, teleport Norska, teleport the Black Pyramid and the Gash, and break the Great Bastion. It's like Cafe will just eat it up by the time you actually get there. So all of this just ends up being fluff. That's my point about this. It's like just pure fluff. Nothing meaningful. You don't do anything meaningful. Nothing you do matters. And that's not really how the Changeling character should be. I understand the idea of an objective-based campaign, but if Axiatl and Malachi show how you can do that very well, and they do, both of them succeed in that respect, the Changeling is the exact opposite. He shows how you shouldn't do it, and there's the problem. Nothing at risk, very boring, and a lot of these schemes that he does have are actually bugged. Yes, there is also that aspect. That quite a lot of these schemes do end up bugging out when you're trying to complete them, which is even worse because you might put in a lot of effort on a scheme and then it's like you can't complete a theater because something's bugged out. Like an objective to sack a settlement or something along those lines just flat bugs out and it doesn't work. Jeez. I mean, if you want to know the quality of Shadows of Change as a DLC and how much effort Creative Assembly put into testing it and doing it properly, yeah, just play this campaign. You will learn how bad everything is with respect to that. Just overall, really horrible campaign, bad design, and Tzeentch in general is in a really bad situation. But out of the two campaigns, at least Kairos is playable somewhat and has a somewhat, you know, normal campaign, whereas the Changeling is just like, how much bullshit can I do on the entire campaign map? That's basically it. And it's not meaningful bullshit, it's, again, pointless trolling. It's not even meaningful trolling. It's not even like, if you had a campaign where it's like, okay, let me sow chaos, let me cause the map to blow up and all that, that would be interesting, but you don't actually achieve that. And you know what the freaking frustration is in all of this? That you can actually achieve more as a regular faction in terms of sowing chaos through regular diplomacy, through settlement trading, create relations with factions, damage yourself with others, cause a lot of chaos from which you can benefit. You can do that for freaking regular diplomacy, which the Changeling doesn't have access to because he can't trade settlements. He can improve relationships through other ways, sure, so chaos in other ways, but it's nowhere near as effective. So from every objective standpoint, this campaign is a massive failure of design, and it's really horrible to play. That's my perspective. Let me know what you guys think about this. What campaigns would you consider worse than the ones I've listed? Which campaigns do you think out of the ones that I listed over here are actually better than I made them out to be? Costine signing out. Stay tuned for more.